And as of course, loading up the podcast this morning, we did a live recording last night. So this is a supplemental because, again, some of the unexpected news on a Monday in February, which we should have expected, but maybe not. But one of the news items that came out today was Nick Maton was cut for a lefty by the name of Kolton Ingram, who was originally drafted by the Tigers in the 37th round back in 2019 and was a COVID cut. And Chris will get into that here in a second. Devin Sweet cleared waivers, so he'll be in the minors with the Tigers. And so, but yeah, the whole Nick Maton, the Dodgers and Yankees made a couple trades too as well. And the Royals signed Bobby Witt Jr. to a massive extension where he gets, I think, 11 years guaranteed paid. So a lot of news for a Monday in February.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're going to tack this on to the front, to the back, or separate, but we mentioned in last night's podcast that Keith Law's prospects list hadn't come out yet, and then it came out today.
Yeah.
He didn't have the team rankings, but he did have 5 Tigers in the top 100. He was another one who had Parker Meadows in there. And I should have known, I mentioned in that he tends to rank Tigers systems lower because he likes up the middle. I haven't had those. I mentioned Max Clark. I forgot Parker Meadows. So that's good. So the Tigers may have a pretty strong ranking in his list with 5 top 100 prospects. So that's another fun one that came out. And yeah, the Bobby Witt news was pretty big across baseball, right? I mean, I think it's an 11-year deal worth $314 million or something like that. And then it can be 14 to 377. And he's got opt-outs after like the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th years. And it's a big deal. It's cool for Kansas City. It's cool for Bobby Witt Jr. It'll be annoying for Tigers because he's a good player and he's going to be there forever. But yeah, I mean, we stick mostly to Tiger stuff. And so the Nick Maton thing is kind of, I think, the biggest story here, as it were, just because, he was one of the, he had 5 home runs last spring training. I think he was, a lot of people were hopeful that he was going to be the answer at third base or second base. And he just went out and didn't perform on either side of the ball. And it'll be interesting to see if somebody else picks him up. It wouldn't shock me at all if somebody takes a chance on him, even though he only hit 150 in the big leagues last year. There's still some intriguing skills there.
Yeah, there's a lot to work with Nick Maton. Yeah, the Wolf, the whole thing. Remember how last year when he got off that strong spring training start, the Wolf and the whole Duran reference, everything. It was really weird to see the kind of descent, if you will. And the guy was busting his ass as much as possible. The guy was all about baseball, and it was just nothing was coming together. And when teams started figuring him out, his MO, it was he couldn't make any solid contact at all. And so, but it shows that Scott Harris is willing to. We saw this with Donnie Sands earlier this year. They're not going to wait around. If you're not going to produce, you're gone. And it was so weird too. We were just mentioning the lack of lefties that could come up, short of Andrew Vasquez. We talked about potentially Andrew Magno and what have you, but now it gives them another lefty to another lefty with some experience in Ingram.
Yeah, it's funny that we mentioned that toward the end of the podcast. The lack of left-handed options there, and like you said, and it wouldn't shock me if we see this has kind of been the MO of Scott Harris since he came here, is that they will claim these guys on waivers, and then a few weeks, a month down the road, they try to pass them through again, and to make room for somebody else, or just they want these kind of fringe major league talents there in Toledo, which again goes to some of the questions we answered last night about pitching depth, that they want these big league level talents as close as possible, and they're just trying to stockpile them. And Ingram, yeah, it's a cool story, man. You touched on it. He was a 37th round draft pick in 2019. Same draft as Brendan White, Bo Brisky, I believe, and Kerry Carpenter, right? So they've ended up getting a bunch of big leaguers after the 10th round in that draft. And, it's a lefty with, an average fastball, I think 92, 94, I think average 93 last year. He's got the full complement of pitches. He's a shorter guy. So I bet, I haven't watched a ton of him, but I would bet there's a pretty flat approach angle to the plate with that fastball. And, the Tigers, they cut him after I think he threw 30 innings in the rookie leagues in 2019, and then 2020 hit. And that was the COVID year. And remember, baseball players all over the place were getting cut. We had, you put up a message board on the old Tigers minor league report, website trying to help minor leaguers who were getting cut and trying to help them get jobs outside of baseball or getting new jobs in baseball, because it was happening to a lot. Like thousands of players got cut. And he was one of the casualties, but luckily for him, he caught on with the Angels. There's a couple stories you can find out there. Cody Stavenhagen wrote a nice one about Brendan White. Brendan White came to live with Kolton Ingram in Georgia and trained during that COVID year. And those are two really late round draft picks, and now they're both big leaguers. So it's pretty cool.
Then it kind of like almost a slap to the glove there when he sets and delivers. Kind of has an old school feel to it when he just comes like right there. That I won't say slap to the glove, but kind of his motion.
To me, there's a little bit of like a Madison Bumgarner, like drop and drive, wide arm swing, lower slot. But yeah, it's a different look, right? That's what teams are looking for out of the bullpen. They want guys who can present different arm slots, different pitch movements, different pitch shapes. So again, they may cut him a week from now and try to clear him through waivers like they did with Devin Sweet. And so we don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's another move. And the big one I think is just the fact that it comes at the expense of Nick Maton, who was kind of considered at this time last year to be a possible building block for the future. And good on the Tigers, right, for giving him a shot and basically deciding it wasn't going to work. They didn't. It's not one of those things where you hold on to a guy forever because you traded for him. They're like, well, you gave it a shot and it didn't work. So move on.
And as far as the Tigers getting love from, let's get to real quick with Keith Law. And Keith Law, like I said, Keith Law is one of those. There's a lot of people either hate him or like him, and there's no in between. But he doesn't really care what you think. He really doesn't, and he's been the kind of the go-to for prospect rankings for a long time. And so when the Keith Law prospect list comes out, that means business, and to a certain extent. And this time the Tigers got love. And so we'll start with Matt Clark at number 14. Jackson Joe comes in at number 29. Cole Keefe at 36. Young at 87. And Parker Meadows at number 97. So there's perhaps the lack of McGonigal love, but still, nevertheless, that's still a pretty good showing by the Tigers.
Yeah, and people immediately picked up on his, what he mentioned in his Max Clark blurb was that he could be a 30-30 center fielder with an OBP close to 400 while playing above average center field defense. And everybody's like, good Lord, like it's like a top 10 player in baseball. And so Jerry, our friend, our data wizard, went through and found all the center fielders since 2003 who have gone 30-30. And it's a pretty ridiculous list. It's Mike Trout, Carlos Beltran, Matt Kemp, Jacoby Ellsbury, Grady Sizemore, Ronald Acuna Jr., Julio Rodriguez, and Cedric Mullins. I think 30-30 is probably, like 30 home runs is probably a little bit optimistic, but I mean, who knows? We're really excited to see Max Clark go out there in his first full season and see what he can do, because everybody kind of says like, yeah, that the power is the one thing that might not project to above average, but who knows? I mean, Corbin Carroll is not a very large man, and he hit 25 home runs this year. And, Clark is bigger than him and gets comparisons to him in terms of his play style. So we'll see.
And here's a question too. I was trying to think about this. When was the last Tiger that went 30 home run?
The Tigers have never had a 30-30 player as far as I know. I think Granderson had that 2020 year or whatever. I think Gibby came really close to 30-30 season once, maybe twice, but I don't think they've ever had a 30-30 guy.
I don't think so either. I was trying to think of, because when I think of the 30-30 era, I kind of think late 80s, early 90s. Is that fair to say, Chris? I mean, that's when I started thinking of when that happened. Yeah.
I think, the first people who were doing it were, like the Willie Mays and Bobby Bonds and guys like that in the 50s and in the 60s and early 70s. But yeah, the 30-30 became a big thing in the 80s when that's, our era growing up, like Darryl Strawberry, Howard Johnson, Eric Davis, guys like that. I think, Bonds, Bonilla may have even done it. Maybe not. Ron Gant, I think, maybe. But yeah, I mean, the Tigers I think Gary Sheffield probably had a 30-30 season. I have to check that. So the Tigers, I think, have had players who had a 30-30 year, but never for them. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, we'll have to do some digging around on that one, because I can't think of that. That's a rare thing, because the Tigers have had, in terms of center fielders, you think of guys with either really good speed and defense, like Milt Kyler, for example. When you and I that blew my mind a couple weeks ago when we were talking about his rookie season, where he was I think in the top 5 in rookie voting. and he had a WAR, almost a 5 WAR was it, or 4.3 WAR,
I
something
think
like
he had
that.
4 plus. Yeah, he ended up having, I think, the highest WAR. He finished third in Rookie of the Year that year, I think. But yeah, he had the highest WAR among the people and the finalists. So, and that was just mostly based on defense. But I'm looking now, and Tigers have never had a 30-30 man. The Braves have had 5. Well, if you count like multiple seasons. Red Sox have had 2. Bobby Bonds was the only one to ever do it for the California Angels. The Cubs have had 2. Sammy Sosa did it twice. Bobby Bonds, White Sox and Rangers. Eric Davis, Barry Larkin, Brandon Phillips for the Reds. Cleveland has had 3 different players. The Rockies have had 3 different players. The Marlins have had 2. The Astros 2. Bobby Witt Jr. was just the second Royals player to do it.
And Eric Davis was with the Tigers, 95, I want to say?
Yeah, that sounds about right. It was like one of his worst years. He actually came back and had a decent year. But yeah, Eric Davis had 37 home runs and 50 steals in 1987. But yeah, no, Howard Johnson was with the Tigers, but didn't do that with the Tigers. And
I mean, you're talking in terms of like top single season batting and putting in that department as far as, I mean, if you want to technically look at Ty Cobb, for example, no, I'm just joking. I was just thinking about the steals aspect because he stole a lot of bases, but he was never a 30-30 man. His best season with stolen bases was he stole 96 bases, but hit 3 home runs in the dead ball era in 1915.
And Ian Kinsler did it twice with the Rangers before he came to the Tigers. Sheffield did not ever go 30-30. He had a 22-22. That was the best he ever did. But yeah, it's a pretty rare club. And again, this is just a side tangent we got because I think that's probably optimistic for Max Clark. But yeah, if he does that, I mean, that's why they took him third overall, right? The ceiling is enormous. If people think he has that level of potential and can play center field, you take that guy, right? It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to mention the 30 for 30 thing, 30 for 30, but the 30 home runs, 30 steal aspect is because the Tigers have had a lot of plotters, if you will, just guys who the guys who have provided power have been either first base or third base, have been corner positions. So just worth mentioning. But yeah, so on the list here, you can see this is from a continuation from last night, the 5 Tigers on the Athletics top 100 list. So please subscribe to all those lists and check those out if you haven't already. I know some people are complaining that, paywall issues and what have you, but here's a little list to help, or a little infographic, if you will, to help you out with that.
Yeah, he mentions Job has the number 1 starter upside, which is something we mentioned in the show. He talks about Colt Keith being, even if he has to move to first base down the line, he's a guy who could hit 280 to 300 with 25 to 35 home runs, so he'll have plenty of bat. He mentions Young as a guy who, he's the sort of guy who could hit, what do you say, a 45 defender at second. If he's with 60 to 70 extra base hits, he's still an above average regular. So he's a believer there. And with Meadows, he talks about he said big velocity might end up being his main weakness, and the obstacle to him becoming a 4+ win player. That's what we talked about in the show, right? Like there's a ceiling there. There's a Josh Outman ceiling where he's a 4-win player and not on many top 100 lists, which is kind of crazy.
That is very crazy. So on that note, this is our supplement. So the regular show you're going to listen to after this, if you're on the audio side of things, just go over and continue on from our show from yesterday. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead. If you missed the show yesterday, it's right there on our podcast feed. So you can check that out. And if you missed anything, and thanks to everybody who participated in there. We had a couple of people who did our GoFundMe as well. So thank you to, I'm blanking on the names currently right now, actually. And I'm doing this real quick. Yeah, OBK and Larry Love. So thank you to those 2 guys. Those guys have been fantastic. Some regular listeners on our Sunday program. So
exquisite,
very absolutely, positively. And I don't have the sound drop on me. It's
off the Frickers building. It's all good.
Yeah, it's off the Frickers building. It's Spontaneous Monday here at the Tiger Minor Report. So we should be getting some shorts out this week. Content's going to start slowly but surely cranking. There's an article that Jerry finished a week ago that I have not had a chance to edit. Well, not a week ago, a few days ago that I got to still do. And it's been crazy times around here. So thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. This is kind of a short little overview, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good week, everybody.